In the mid-1970s, the emergence of two British athletes divided a nation. Middle distance runners from opposite ends of the social spectrum. They took the athletics world by storm, amassing 8 gold medals and breaking 15 world records. But defeating each other provided the ultimate satisfaction. Britain in the 1970s was in political crisis. A failing economy led to mass unemployment. Intense industrial action was the norm. And rubbish lay uncollected during the winter of discontent. Throughout society, an anti-establishment feeling had taken hold. Yet few would have imagined the traditional world of track and field would come to represent Britain's growing class divide.
You were either an Ovett person or you were a Co person. And I think that added to the intrigue.
One guy at Loughborough University, the other guy, at Art College in Brighton. Just totally different backgrounds, totally different approaches to life.
We'll have one who was the tough working class guy, and they decided that was Steve Ovett. And we'll have the tough Seb Cool.
We were acutely conscious that anything we said had, the potential for an incendiary flair.
The whole thing was scripted very well, and I think the press had a hell of a day with it.
It was a nation divided, but divided around two iconic athletes who represented Great Britain.
It was almost like a marketing man's dream, but it wasn't. It was real.
In the 1950s, Brighton was a working-class seaside town. South of London, it was here in 1955 that Steve Ovett was born and raised. And whilst his family were running their own market stall, Steve developed a love and talent for athletics.
He had immense talent, and it was, he could win the 400 metres, the 200 metres at the Sussex School, I think even the long jump. He was a truly talented athlete.
Initially a 400-metre runner, by the time he was 18, Ovett had found the 800 metres and 1500 metres were his natural distances. He had the perfect physique for a middle-distance runner, and his class was immediately obvious.
He was one of these sort of guys who matured quite early.
He was a strapping kid. As an early teenager, he was already close to 6 feet tall, very big, barrel-chested.
Ovett had talent to spare. In 1974, aged 19, he won a silver medal for Great Britain at the European Championships in Rome in the 800 metres.
There he was, European Championship silver medalist, and you could see the road ahead for Steve being paved with gold.
Watching that day was an interested spectator.
When I was trucking around cross-country courses at English schools level, and I'm only a year younger than Steve, Steve was European silver medalist.
Sebastian Coe was born in West London in 1956. On moving to Sheffield, he too developed a talent for middle-distance running. Though smaller and slighter than Ovett, Coe managed to avoid the physicality synonymous with the sport simply by running faster.
Seb contradicted all of the ideas on 800. He was little, he was small, he could be pushed around. But he had amazing strength, amazing speed, amazing acceleration, and great determination.
He had to throw tons and tons of weights, during his late teens, early 20s, in order to get the strength, especially in his upper body.
He went from the front very often. He could control it from the front, from the back. When he was in his best form, he was, I think, unbeatable. It was a sight to behold.
Unusually, Coe was trained by his father, Peter, an engineer who initially knew nothing of athletics. But the two made the relationship work.
On the surface, it looked like there was a very domineering father and a son that just did what he was told, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. Both of them knew that when crunch came, it was Seb who made the critical decisions, because only Seb could run round and round the track.
While the 19-year-old Coe was developing under his father's tutelage, Ovett reached his first Olympics in Montreal. He failed to qualify for the 1500 metres final, but finished 5th in the 800 metres. A great achievement for a young athlete. A month later, Coe took on John Walker, the newly crowned Olympic 1500 metres champion, in Gateshead.
He actually led against the Olympic champion with 200 metres to go.
And Walker's got it all to do now, but that wind in the straight could be the telling factor.
I think John Walker did win, but Walker himself admitted. He said, I wrote to my coach that night. He said there was this little guy, I'd got no idea who he was, who was leading me at one point by 50 metres.
And once again, Walker has the power. Walker wins. Walker up second, Coe third.
Coe would not remain unknown for long. He was physically different to Ovett, but the two were opposites in every way, and the British media sensed a classic rivalry.
I think it was that polarisation, you know, the perceptions of them that they were totally different in every case, you know, in class, in upbringing, in demeanour, in politics.
You were either an Ovett person or you were a Coe person, and I think that added to the intrigue. It was a nation divided, but divided around two iconic athletes who represented Great Britain.
Now it's come right.
The media-friendly Coe was the good guy. Ovett's refusal to engage with the press, coupled with his habit of celebrating before a race was even won, marked him out as the bad guy.
Probably at the period, most of the press were a little bit more inclined towards Seb because he would cooperate more.
What we in the press would do. Oh, Seb, did you hear what Steve said about you? Coe was always terribly diplomatic, but he would get annoyed from time to time.
He's an athlete. I respect all athletes. Steve is a very talented athlete. You know, there isn't a very great deal more to say, is there?
I didn't mind the bad cop so much, and Seb quite liked the good cop image.
The bad guy continued his dominance on the track. In 1977, he faced a competitive field in the World Cup 1500 metres.
We watched the race, and it had John Walker, Olympic champion, world record holder from the year before. Thomas Wessinghager, European champion, European record holder. I mean, just the best athletes around. And what Steve did in 5 or 6 paces, just leaving the back straight and creating not just daylight, but an absolute chasm.
And there's one man's blazing speed that has caused this field asunder.
John said that he was actually so blown away by the speed that Steve left them on that bend that he did throw in the towel, walked off the track.
With the exception of a schoolboy meet 6 years earlier, the 1978 European Championships in Prague would be the first time Coe and Ovett met on the track, in the final of the 800 metres. Finally, the press and the public were granted their wish. Coe versus Ovett in the same race.
It was a toss-up in Prague, the European Championships, as to which one would win.
The focus was on the two of them, and an assumption was they would win gold and silver, and it was only which one would win gold or silver.
Prague was my first major championship. I think there was an element of probably believing a little bit too much, as the British press portrayed, that this was only a race between the two of us, and the medals were simply to be dished out.
His tactics at the time were going as fast as he could on the first lap. And he said to me, what do you think? And I said, I think going fast on the first lap is a good formula. Don't go too fast.
I always remember that race. Seb said that he went out like the bat from hell to try and get away from it. He did. He went through in 49 seconds, which is unheard of for the middle one.
And the time, an astonishing 49.32. It is very fast.
I think it was the fastest first lap ever in an 800-metre race. And it was a strategy that was going quite well until I was just entering the finishing straight, and I just realised there was nowhere else to go. I'd been through all the gears, and this had an inevitability about it.
He got a bit carried away. He ran a bit too quick on the first lap. Ovett followed him and tracked him, and it looked like, Seb had run out of steam.
I remember thinking, why is he slowing down? Is he going to kick again? He's going to kick again. I've got to wait, I've got to wait, I've got to wait, I've got to wait, and I waited and waited and waited.
I remember the white vest coming. I didn't even need to look, that I knew this was Steve coming by. And in fairness, he did actually have the good grace to smile as he came by.
The guy from behind was gathering speed all the time.
I was also trying to conceal a smile because this guy came just bombing past both of us.
And have the Britons destroyed each other? Yes, they have. And by a the gold medal.
There was a guy named Olaf Bayer who ran exactly 2 seconds faster than he'd ever run in his life before or would ever run afterwards, and breezed past Ovett, who had earlier in the race breezed past Coe, and beat the pair of them.
I think it was probably a very good lesson to both of us that, whether we had realised it or not at the time, the world was a fairly competitive place.
Ovett was still able to salvage something from the championships, winning his first ever gold medal in the 1500 metres. He returned home with a silver and a gold. Coe, with a sole bronze, now had an added incentive to step from his rival's shadow.
I remember Seb saying, you know, Christmas Day, I'll be out training twice, because I know that down in Brighton, where Steve Ovett lives, he'll be out training twice. So the rivalry was brilliant because it spurred them on in their own training.
In athletics, for better or for worse, and it's got its advantages and gross disadvantages, there is another arbiter of excellence, another judge of excellence apart from winning races, and that's setting world records.
By 1979, Steve Ovett was the main man, both on the track and in the public's eye, until an incredible 41 days for Sebastian Coe.
I remember ringing up Sheffield and speaking to the old man and saying, well, look, you know, I'm running better than I thought, and I'm certainly running times that I think you would be quite impressed with.
He breaks Alberto Wantarena's world record for the 800 metres by a whole second. I mean, extraordinary. There was a second Oslo meeting that year, and so Coe's invited back to that. Now, he hasn't run a mile for 2 years.
I broke away from the field, finding it ridiculously easy, really, about 500 or 600 metres from the tape, and there was another world record.
So the British #2 is suddenly the world record holder at both the 800 metres and the mile. Of course, everybody wants a piece of the action then. They invited Coe to come and have a crack at the 1500 metres world record.
Of course, I wanted to be the first athlete to hold the 3 world records simultaneously, and the media pressure for that one was colossal. I just nicked inside, I think I nicked it by about 1/10 of a second.
He's run 3 world records in 41 days. He's absolutely on top of the world. And suddenly, Ovett, who's been sitting at home watching all of this, he's not only #2 in Britain, he's #2 in the world.
That was, to me, I think, the turning point where I thought, well, hey, you know, I've not just got the rest of the world to take on, I've got someone in my back garden.
Of course, Steve Ovett wasn't taking part last night, and he said that it was a hollow victory because he wasn't there. How do you feel about that?
I feel the same way as anybody else in that field last night, that whoever won, I don't think, would have considered it a hollow victory.
Do you think there's a bit of a needle going to be now between you two, a bit of intense rivalry?
No, certainly not. I mean, the rivalry will be on the track, certainly not off it.
As the 1980 Moscow Olympics drew nearer, both men stepped up their preparation. So far, they had studiously avoided competing against each other. But in an act of gamesmanship, Ovett entered Coe's warm-up races. Coe switched events.
To make matters worse, Ovett didn't even turn up. He'd made them switch events, and then he didn't turn up, so they were furious.
The rivalry was near boiling point as both arrived in Moscow, ready to do battle. Avoiding each other was no longer an option. There was no hiding place in the pursuit of Olympic gold. And with many countries boycotting the Games, the world was looking towards Coe and Ovett to ignite the Olympics.
And to loads of people from around the world, they said that wasn't the Moscow Olympics, it was the Coe-Ovett Olympics.
And I think that both of us probably felt the pressure incredibly.
Coe was going to win the Olympic 800 metres in Moscow, and Ovett was going to win the 1500 metres.
Here they were, showdown in Moscow, and the first event was 800 metres.
They both won their heats and semi-finals. Yeah, so it's set up absolutely perfectly.
Coe was the favourite. The experience lay with Ovett. Finally, after all the talking, the reputations of both rested on 2 laps of the Moscow track.
800 mètres, finale, homme.
Even from the TV set, as they walked out on the track for the 800 metres final, Steve Ovett was in control.
You look at the athletes warming up, Seb did look a bit scared. Steve Ovett looked the most composed.
It was slow. You know, everyone was expecting the way that Coe usually runs and the way that he'd been running up to that, everyone thought the gun would go and Coe would make it a really quick, hard race from the gun, which is exactly what I'd expected. And it didn't happen. We meandered around for the first lap. There was no sign of Coe at all.
The first lap of the race, he ran like a scared rabbit, really. Said he didn't get it right at all. Steve Ovett had complete control.
Ovett at one stage was boxed in between two giant East Germans. Of course, what does he do? He elbows them out of the way.
All I did was make sure that I was in the right place at the right time, and in fact I was quite brutally doing it.
It was very, very slow. I thought, might as well have a go. Go at the bell, try and get a gap, and who knows, he could hang on. Ran out of gas at 600 metres.
Seb was a little bit nervous and perhaps ran a bad race, but that's tough luck.
He had tactics in his mind, the tactics didn't work out, he didn't put himself in a good position, and he truly didn't run a good race.
If you ever wanted to show how not to run an 800 metres, I think I probably managed to commit more of the cardinal sins at 800 metres than anybody's ever managed to compound in 1 minute and 3/4.
You look at the race tape, Ovett never looks at Coe once.
It was a great line that David Coleman used.
Those blue eyes like chips of ice.
And it was true that he had absolute focus.
Ovett hits the front and Coe can't get through.
Singular thought in my mind was it's the Olympics, for God's sake, win it.
And he literally wins as he pleases.
And Ovett looks up in triumph. That was a race about experience.
Steve had this great gift to be able to accelerate with 200 metres to go. And it was very predictable, but there's not a lot you could do about it.
One of the newspaper headlines was, "The bad guy wins." He said, where's this come from? He said, "I won a gold medal for Britain." And he said, "I got back to the Olympic Village." He said, people didn't know what to say to me. He said, as if they were embarrassed to congratulate me because everybody thought Coe was going to win.
The gold medal is awarded to Stephen Ovett.
While Ovett celebrated, Coe had to be content with silver. He still had one more chance, but the 1500 metres was not his strongest event. It was Ovett's.
I needed a little bit more time to get my mind around the fact this was an Olympic Games and it was going to be quite serious. I woke up very quickly after he turned me over in the 8th, though, I have to say.
We use the words like devastation and things too often in sport, but he really was devastated. And to pull himself back from that defeat, to come out into the final of the 1500, not scared, but really looking forward to it, was a great, great achievement.
I comforted myself by saying, look, all right, you've cocked up big time. I just kept saying to myself, look, if anybody is going to beat you tonight, they're going to do so. They will finish the race with blood in their shoe.
The 1500 metres Olympic final.
The 1500 challenge, I think it's a great distance, 3 3/4 laps. Not enough time to get bored. You have to keep on your toes. You can't afford to make many mistakes. You only get really one opportunity to kind of make a defensive move, and you only get really one opportunity to make an aggressive move.
Unlike the 800 metres, Coe refused to be boxed in and took his preferred place towards the front of the pack. Ovett stalked him all the way.
I'm sure it wasn't planned, but it was ideal for Seb because he didn't have to worry about the taxis. He just had to worry about outrunning the opposition.
The first 2 laps were slow, but with 1 lap remaining, Coe, Ovett and the East German Jürgen Straub were ideally placed to make their move.
The pole position in a race is on the shoulder of the leader, so you can jump them when you need to. And he jumped Straub with 300 metres to go.
And he was perfectly placed on Straub's shoulder. And at the point when Steve Ovett normally makes his attack, Seb made his.
He's looking for Ovett running where he is. He's right there behind him. And could this be Ovett's first defeat? Ovett is in trouble. And Coe gets the revenge he wants. Coe wins!
Coming back and winning the 1500 metres in such a manner, but the most outstanding part of this man's talent was his mental fortitude.
Back home in Sheffield, the Coe family celebrated their son's success.
I knew when he kicked twice there was no way anyone was going to get him.
The gold medal is awarded to Sebastian Coe, Great Britain.
It was Ovett's first defeat in the 1500 metres for 3 years, and to his fiercest rival.
Maybe I should have been a bit more, I don't know, cutthroat, cold-blooded, but I wasn't. Simple as that. I wasn't good enough, and I was beaten by better guys.
As we came out of Moscow, it ended all square. And probably looking back, that was the way it should have ended.
The pair returned as heroes. While Ovett shied away from the media, Coe embraced his new role as the face of British sport.
Obviously, there's tremendous local interest, but to have this kind of support is unbelievable.
Oh, I think he's lovely. I think he's a lovely boy. I think everybody likes him because, you know, his attitude to life and things like that, he's so well-mannered.
The year following the Olympics was expected to be quieter, with no major championships or real opportunities to meet on the track. Instead, the Coe-Ovett rivalry reached new heights.
They both said 1981 was their best year.
In '81, I had decided I just wanted a year where I just ran.
Basically, they just went out, taking their pacemakers with them wherever they went, and attacked each other's records.
I wasn't interested in championships. I wanted to put the 800-metre record out of sight, which I did for a year or two, and I wanted to go and just get out on the circuit, run in the cities and see the people I like racing against.
First, Coe broke the 800 metres record, and then came the mile.
In one sort of 9-10 day period, first Coe broke Ovett's world record. Then a couple of days later, Ovett broke Coe's world record. Then a week later, Coe broke Ovett's world record, and that was the end of it because Ovett never got close to Coe's time.
By the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, British athletics was on a high. Despite suffering injuries and illness in the build-up to the Games, Coe and Ovett declared themselves fit to do battle for gold once again.
In '84, all of them had their problems, actually. I don't think Steve Ovett or Seb Coe particularly had a smooth ride towards the Olympic Games.
First up was the 800 metres. Both men qualified for the final, but Ovett was struggling.
But the heat and humidity got to Ovett. He was never a factor. I mean, he almost killed himself in qualifying to defend his 800 metres title. He threw himself across the line in the semi-final, and he was the last guy to qualify.
In the final, Ovett struggled and finished in last place. But Coe too was denied the gold medal he so craved.
In the 800, he ran brilliantly well, and you know, Joachim Cruz from Brazil won the gold medal, but Seb had nothing to complain about. Unlike Moscow, he did everything right, just was beaten by a better person on the day. Steve Ovett had respiratory problems. He'd struggled to make any headway and, you know, wasn't able to do himself justice.
In the 1500 metres final, Coe and Ovett faced another British contender, Steve Cram. Could he defeat the elder statesman? Could Ovett make amends? Or would Coe become the first man to retain the Olympic 1500-metre title?
They came to the bell, and there was Coe, Ovett and Cram in line. And I said, you know, I never thought I'd see this moment, 3 British athletes in contention for a gold medal in the Olympic Games, 1500 metres, at which point Steve stepped off the track and Seb went for it, and Steve Cram couldn't live with him.
The great skill about the Olympic Games is being able to be at your best on a given day and then compete at your best, to get everything right mentally and tactically. And you only get one chance every 4 years to become a real legend, which is the Olympic gold, and he did it, and he did it twice.
Memorable moments for both men, for very different reasons. Coe celebrating his gold as Ovett left the stadium on a stretcher. It was the last time they would meet in such exalted surroundings. Seb Coe and Steve Ovett only raced 7 times. Coe beat Ovett in 4. Winning remained their ultimate goal, but their rivalry inspired the golden age of British athletics.
it's natural that there's going to be, you know, intense competition between the two. And of course, yes, the media like nothing better. I mean, it's a tailor-made script.
I mean, they met 7 times in 17 years, I think it was.
Probably on reflection, that's part of the soap opera that was Ovett and Co, was the fact that they didn't race each other that often.
We didn't race against each other other than the Olympic Games, which was when it mattered.
If there was a circuit like there is nowadays, we could have done a lot more. We could have had a lot more races and perhaps maybe clashed against each other, who knows?
This was a great rivalry in sport. It was a fantastic rivalry in athletics, and it was a privilege being amongst it.